The words slithered across the table in the ancient tongue, a language the server was never supposed to understand. Look at her. Thin as a starved dog. I wonder if she even shifts anymore, or if she's forgotten what it feels like to have a spine. Seren Valeth kept her expression blank as she refilled the water glasses. Her hands did not tremble. Her heartbeat did not spike. After 18 months of hiding, she had learned to bury every reaction beneath layers of carefully constructed nothing. The speaker was Lord Fenris, a bloated commander in the Alpha King's inner circle. He lounged in his chair like the world owed him comfort, speaking freely because no common wolf could possibly comprehend the sacred language of royal bloodlines. But Seren was not common. She had been born in the high halls of Thornmere, trained in the ancient tongue before she could walk, groomed to become Luna to Aldrich Morvain, one of the most powerful alphas in the Northern Territories, until he had destroyed everything. Perhaps she's one of those packless strays, another voice joined, deeper, colder. The ones who crawl to border towns hoping someone will claim them out of pity. Seren's gaze flickered toward the speaker before she could stop herself. Cassian Vargrim, the Alpha King of the Eastern Dominion. He sat at the head of the table like a throne had been carved into the booth itself. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on ancient coins, all sharp angles and brutal elegance. His eyes were the color of winter storms, pale gray with flecks of ice that seemed to cut through everything they touched. He was watching her, not with interest, with assessment, the way a predator watches movement in tall grass. She has decent bone structure, Fenris continued in the ancient tongue, for a servant. Perhaps we should ask if she's available for the evening's entertainment. Laughter rippled around the table. Seren set down the water pitcher. Will there be anything else, my lords? Her voice was steady, unremarkable, the voice of a woman who had heard nothing. Cassian's head tilted slightly, almost imperceptibly. No, he said in the common tongue. You may go. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, spine straight, steps measured. Behind her, the Alpha King spoke again in the ancient tongue. 4 words meant only for his companions. She understood every word. Seren's blood turned to ice. The kitchen doors swung shut behind her, but Seren didn't stop. She moved past the cooks, past the dishwashers, heading straight for the back entrance. She had maybe 90 seconds before he sent someone after her. 18 months of building a new identity. 18 months of scrubbing floors and enduring leers and pretending she was nobody. All of it crumbling because she'd let her eyes flicker for half a heartbeat too long. Stupid. Careless. Fatal. The back door was 10 steps away. 8. 5. A hand closed around her wrist. She spun, claws already extending, then froze. Cassian Vargrim stood behind her, having moved through the crowded kitchen without making a single sound. His grip was iron but not painful. His expression was unreadable. The ancient tongue, he said quietly, hasn't been taught outside royal bloodlines in 300 years. I don't know what you're talking about. Your pupils dilated when Fenris suggested purchasing you for the evening. Your pulse jumped when I said you understood. He stepped closer. You controlled your scent almost perfectly. Almost. But I caught the spike of fear when I spoke those last 4 words. Seren's mind raced through options. Lie, fight, beg, run. None of them would work against the most powerful alpha on the continent. Who are you? Cassian asked. Nobody. Nobody doesn't understand a dead language. His thumb pressed against the inside of her wrist, directly over her racing pulse. Nobody doesn't have training to suppress their wolf's reactions. Nobody doesn't move like they were taught in a high court. You're mistaken. I'm never mistaken. He released her wrist but didn't step back. You have 2 choices. Tell me who you really are, or I drag you back to that table and let my men interrogate you. They're far less gentle than I am. Seren looked at the back door. Freedom was 3 steps away. She'd never make it. My name, she said slowly, was Seren Valeth, of Thornmere. Something shifted in the Alpha King's expression. Recognition. And something else. Something she couldn't identify. Valeth, he repeated. The Luna bloodline that Aldrich Morvain claimed went extinct. He lied. Clearly. Cassian's eyes swept over her. The threadbare uniform, the calloused hands, the shadows beneath her eyes. The question is why the last daughter of a royal Luna line is serving water to drunk commanders in a border town tavern. Because the alternative was dying in the woods where Aldrich left me. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Left you, Cassian said quietly, after he took everything else. They sat in a private room above the tavern, the sounds of the common hall muffled beneath them. Cassian had dismissed his men with a single look. Now it was just the two of them, a bottle of wine neither had touched, and 18 months of secrets hanging in the air. Start from the beginning, Cassian said. Seren stared at the scarred wooden table. I was betrothed to Aldrich Morvain when I was 17. Our families had been allied for generations. The Morvains had military strength. The Valeths had Luna bloodline, the ability to sense pack bonds, to strengthen them, to identify traitors before they struck. Useful abilities for an alpha who wanted to expand his territory? Exactly. Aldrich didn't want a mate, he wanted a weapon. She traced a groove in the wood. For 2 years I played my role. I strengthened his pack bonds. I identified 3 assassination attempts before they happened. I made him untouchable. What changed? I discovered what he was really doing with that protection. Seren's jaw tightened. He wasn't just defending his territory. He was systematically destroying rival packs from within. Using the intelligence I provided to assassinate their leaders, steal their resources, and absorb their survivors into his own ranks. Conquest through manipulation rather than open warfare. 12 packs in 3 years, thousands of wolves either dead or enslaved, and I was the one making it possible. Her voice cracked slightly. When I confronted him, demanded he stop, he laughed. He said I was naive, that this was how power really worked. And when you threatened to expose him? Seren looked up, meeting Cassian's pale eyes. He told his pack I had gone feral, that my Luna abilities had driven me mad, made me dangerous. He staged an attack, made it look like I had tried to kill him in his sleep. She pulled down the collar of her uniform, revealing a jagged scar across her collarbone. His men dragged me into the thornwood at midnight. They were supposed to kill me and bury the body. But they didn't. The wolf who was ordered to finish me was the son of a family I had saved from one of Aldrich's purges. He let me run instead. She released her collar. I've been hiding ever since, moving from town to town, never staying long enough for anyone to ask questions. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Harder. Aldrich Morvain has been destroying everything I care about for over a decade. He controls the northern mountain passes. Every trade route, every alliance I try to build. He's there, blocking it. I've tried diplomacy. I've tried economic pressure. I've tried surgical military strikes. Nothing works. He's too well protected. His pack is fanatically loyal because they believe he's invincible. Because of you. Cassian leaned forward. You were the source of his intelligence. You were the reason he could anticipate every move against him. Yes. Which means you know his weaknesses, his blind spots, the cracks in his defenses. Seren saw where this was going. You want me to help you destroy him. I want you to help me expose him. Every crime, every murdered alpha, every pack he's consumed through treachery. Cassian's eyes burned with cold fire. You have information no one else possesses. Names of collaborators, locations of evidence, the truth about what happened to those 12 packs. And if I help you, what do I get? Protection. Real protection, Not running from town to town hoping he doesn't find you. Cassian stood, walking to the window. Aldrich believes you're dead. The moment you surface anywhere in his sphere of influence, that changes. He'll send hunters. He'll send assassins. He'll burn down anyone who sheltered you just to send a message. I know. But if you're under my protection, formally, publicly, he can't touch you without declaring war on the Eastern Dominion, and he's not ready for that war. Not yet. Seren's heart hammered against her ribs. What kind of formal protection? Cassian turned to face her. Marriage. The word hung between them like a blade. You're joking. I never joke about strategy. He walked back to the table, placing both hands flat on its surface. You marry me. You become the Luna Queen of the Eastern Dominion. You gain rank, resources, and an army between you and everyone who wants you dead. In exchange, you help me build an unassailable case against Aldrich Morvain. We expose him together. We watch his empire crumble. You don't even know me. I know you chose conscience over safety. I know you survived being left for dead. I know you've spent 18 months hiding in plain sight without breaking. His eyes held hers. I've worked with far less promising allies. This isn't about alliance. You're asking me to bind my life to yours. I'm asking you to let me protect you while we destroy a common enemy. Everything else is negotiable. Seren stood, her legs unsteady. She walked to the window, looking out at the dark streets below. Somewhere out there, Aldrich Morvain was building his power, consuming more packs, preparing for whatever conquest came next, and he thought she was rotting in an unmarked grave. If I do this, she said slowly, I want your word on something. Name it. Justice, not just revenge. The packs he destroyed, their survivors deserve to know the truth. The wolves he murdered deserve to have their names spoken. I won't help you tear him down just so you can take his territory. Cassian was quiet for a moment. Agreed. Justice, not just conquest. And if I ever become a liability, if protecting me puts your people in danger, you let me go. No argument. That won't happen. Promise me anyway. He crossed the room until he stood close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body. I promise. He extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? Seren looked at his hand. Scarred knuckles. A ring bearing the Vargrim crest. The hand of a man who had just offered to make her a queen so they could burn down her enemies together. She had been left in the dark to die by a man who saw her as a tool. Now she was being offered a chance to become something far more dangerous. Seren took his hand. We have an agreement. His grip was firm, warm. Then rest tonight. Tomorrow we travel to Ironholt. We have work to do. He released her hand and moved toward the door. Your Majesty, she called after him. He paused, glancing back. Why were you in this border town tonight? An Alpha King doesn't usually dine in taverns this far from the capital. For a moment, something flickered across his face, something almost vulnerable beneath the iron control. I was returning from negotiations with the Western Alphas. This route is faster, even if it's less comfortable. He opened the door. I don't believe in fate, Miss Valeth, but I'm grateful I chose speed over luxury tonight. Then he was gone. Seren stood alone in the lamplight, feeling the weight of the choice she had just made. She had been cast out, hunted, erased by a man who saw her as disposable. Now she had bound herself to a man who saw her as a weapon. She could only hope she had chosen the lesser danger. Ironholt rose from the eastern cliffs like a declaration of war against the sky itself. The fortress was carved directly into the mountain face, black stone towers reaching upward, narrow windows glinting like predator eyes in the morning sun. Below, the capital city sprawled across the valley floor, smoke rising from 10,000 chimneys, the distant sounds of commerce and life drifting up on the wind. Seren had expected something grand. She hadn't expected something terrifying. It was built during the Blood Wars, Cassian said, riding beside the carriage. My ancestors held it against 6 separate sieges. The walls have never been breached. Comforting. That was the intention. The gates opened without command, guards snapping to attention as the Alpha King passed. Seren felt their eyes on the carriage, curiosity and suspicion mingling in their gazes. By nightfall, the entire fortress would know their king had returned, with a strange woman. By morning, the rumors would be uncontrollable. The household staff assembled in the great courtyard, at least 60 wolves in formal livery, from the ancient steward to the youngest kitchen hand. At their head stood a woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back severely, her posture suggesting steel had been sewn into her spine. "Your Majesty," the woman said with a precise bow. "Welcome home." Marin. Cassian dismounted, then helped Seren from the carriage. His hands were steady on her waist, impersonal but careful. "This is Seren Valeth. She will be the Luna Queen within the fortnight. See to her preparation." If Marin was surprised, she hid it flawlessly. Her sharp eyes swept over Seren, the threadbare traveling clothes, the calloused hands, the defiant set of her jaw, and something that might have been approval flickered briefly. "Of course, Your Majesty." She turned to Seren. "Welcome to Ironholt, my lady. We have much work ahead." The following 12 days blurred into an endless gauntlet of instruction. Seren learned which forms of address applied to which ranks. She memorized the names, territories, and grudges of every alpha in the Eastern Dominion. She practiced walking in gowns that weighed more than her entire tavern wardrobe combined. She learned that Cassian had ruled for 11 years, since his father's death in a border skirmish that many suspected Aldrich had orchestrated. That he had never taken a Luna, despite pressure from every noble family in the realm. That he was feared by his enemies, respected by his allies, and understood by almost no one. She learned that 5 years ago, Aldrich had murdered Cassian's younger sister, a diplomatic envoy traveling under flags of peace. Her carriage had been attacked by bandits that were never identified. Cassian had never been able to prove Aldrich's involvement, but he knew. Everyone knew. She learned that Ironholt's library contained 300 years of intelligence reports, and that Cassian had read every single one. "Tell me about the Ashbourne Pack," he said during one of their evening sessions, maps spread across the war room table. "Aldrich absorbed them 4 years ago. Their alpha was Brennan Ashbourne, honorable, traditional, refused to bend the knee." Seren traced the territory on the map. Aldrich challenged him to formal combat, then had his archers poison the ceremonial wine beforehand. Brennan was dead before the first strike landed. Witnesses? His own pack. But Aldrich claimed Brennan had been ill, that the collapse was coincidence. Anyone who disagreed disappeared within the month. Cassian made a note. "What happened to the Ashbourne heir?" "A daughter. 16 at the time." Seren's voice tightened. "Aldrich gave her to one of his commanders as a reward, a wolf named Draven. I don't know if she's still alive." Something dark passed through Cassian's eyes. "We'll find out. And this Draven, how loyal is he to Aldrich?" "Loyal enough to do his dirty work, but he's also ambitious. He resents being kept at commander rank when wolves with half his experience have been promoted above him." Seren paused. If someone offered him a way out, protection in exchange for testimony, he might take it. Cassian filed that information away. Useful. Continue. Night after night they built their case. Seren provided names, dates, methods. Cassian cross-referenced with his own intelligence, identified corroborating sources, and mapped the web of corruption that Aldrich had woven across the northern territories. It was clinical work, strategic, impersonal. But sometimes, when they worked late into the night, Seren caught Cassian watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. And sometimes, When he explained a particularly complex political maneuver, his hand would brush against hers over the maps. Neither of them mentioned it. The night before the wedding, Marin brought Seren a small wooden box. "From His Majesty," she said. "He asked me to tell you that it belonged to his mother." Inside lay a circlet of woven silver, set with a single black opal that seemed to contain captured starlight. There was a note beneath it, written in Cassian's precise hand. "This was meant for the woman who would rule beside me. I never thought I'd find someone worthy of it. Wear it tomorrow, not because I command it, but because you've earned it." Seren held the circlet up to the candlelight, watching colors shift in the opal's depths. She had come to Ironholt expecting cold strategy. She was beginning to suspect something far more dangerous was taking root. The wedding was private. Just Cassian, Seren, the High Priest, and Marin as witness. No grand celebration, no political theater. That would come later. But 3 days after she became Luna Queen, the first test arrived in the form of 12 visiting alphas. "They're allies," Cassian explained as servants transformed the Great Hall for a formal dinner. "Wolves who've suffered under Aldrich's expansion, but lacked the strength to oppose him openly. They need to see that you're credible, that our alliance is real. And if they don't believe it, then the coalition I've spent 3 years building collapses before it begins." No pressure at all. Seren dressed in deep emerald silk, the silver circlet resting on her brow. When she descended the grand staircase to meet the guests, conversation stuttered and stopped. She knew what they saw. An unknown woman wearing a queen's crown. An outsider who had appeared from nowhere to claim the most powerful Luna position on the continent. She also knew what she needed them to see. "Alpha Kendrick," she said, approaching the first guest, a weathered man with a scarred face and suspicious eyes. "Your family held the Greymore Valley for 6 generations before Aldrich's forces displaced you. Your youngest daughter was bonded to a wolf from the Ashbourne pack." She paused. "I grieve for what you've lost." Kendrick's expression shifted. "You know of the Ashbournes?" "I know Brennan Ashbourne was murdered through treachery, not defeated in honorable combat. I know his daughter was taken as a war prize, and I know you've been waiting for someone to speak these truths aloud." The hall had gone silent. "How do you know these things?" another alpha demanded. "Because I was there." Seren turned to address the room. "My name before I became Luna Queen was Seren Valeth. For 2 years I was betrothed to Aldrich Morvain. I saw his crimes from the inside. I have names, dates, and evidence that will destroy him. If you're willing to stand with us when the time comes." The silence stretched. Then Alpha Kendrick raised his glass. "To the Luna Queen, and to the death of tyrants." One by one, the other alphas followed. Seren felt Cassian's gaze on her from across the room. When she met his eyes, she saw something new there. Not just respect. Pride. The summons arrived by Raven on a gray morning 3 weeks later. "The Concordance," Marin announced, handing Seren the scroll. "A gathering of all major alphas in the realm, held every 5 years to negotiate treaties and settle disputes." Seren read the elegant script, her stomach tightening. "It's hosted by the Northern Coalition this year." "Yes." "Which means Aldrich will be there." "Yes." She found Cassian in the war room, already studying maps of the Concordance location, a neutral fortress called Thorngate, nestled in the mountains between territories. "We don't have to attend," he said without looking up. "I can send representatives, claim illness, buy more time." "No." Seren set the scroll on the table. "If we hide, he wins. The other alphas need to see that we're not afraid of him." "Are you afraid of him?" The question hung between them. "Terrified," she admitted. "He left me to die in the dark, Cassian. Some nights I still wake up running from shadows that smell like his wolves." Cassian finally looked up. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. You don't have to face him. Yes, I do, because every day he believes I'm dead is a day he feels safe. She met his eyes. I want him to know I survived. I want him to see me standing beside you, wearing a crown, untouchable. I want him to understand that everything he tried to bury is about to rise up and destroy him. Cassian studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. We leave in 4 days. Stay close to me at all times. Don't engage him directly unless I'm present. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, we leave immediately. Agreed. He crossed to her, stopping close enough that she could see the flecks of ice in his gray eyes. Seren. Yes? When he sees you, he'll know everything has changed. He'll be dangerous. Cassian's hand rose, almost touching her face before he caught himself. Don't let him see your fear. Don't let him see anything except the queen you've become. And what have I become? Something shifted in his expression, something raw and unguarded. Someone I never anticipated, he said quietly. Someone who's become essential to me in ways I don't fully understand yet. Then he stepped back, the moment broken. 4 days, he repeated. Rest while you can. He left her standing alone in the war room, heart pounding, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down like a coming storm. In 4 days she would face the man who had tried to erase her from existence, and she would show him exactly what his failure had created. Thorngate Fortress emerged from the mountain mist like a stone giant rising from slumber. Banners from 24 territories snapped in the wind, wolves from every corner of the realm gathering under the ancient laws of Concordance. Seren's hands trembled slightly as their carriage approached the gates. She hid them in the folds of her gown. Breathe, Cassian murmured beside her. You outrank half the wolves in that fortress. Remember that. And the other half? Fear me too much to touch you. They descended from the carriage into a courtyard filled with watching eyes. Alphas and their entourages clustered in careful groupings, alliances and enmities mapped in the spaces between them. The whispers began immediately. Is that the new Luna Queen? She appeared from nowhere. No one knows her bloodline. I heard she was a servant before he found her. Seren kept her spine straight, her expression serene. The silver circlet caught the light as she walked. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. The great hall was a cathedral of stone and firelight, long tables arranged in a horseshoe pattern around a central speaking floor. Cassian guided her to their designated position, high table, eastern quadrant, seats of honor. She was pouring water into her goblet when she felt it. A familiar darkness pressing against her senses. A scent she had never been able to forget. Pine smoke and cold iron and the metallic tang of cruelty. Aldrich Morvain had entered the hall. He looked exactly as she remembered. Golden hair swept back from a face that seemed designed to inspire trust, warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled, the kind of beauty that made people want to believe in him. She knew what lay beneath that mask. Aldrich moved through the crowd, accepting greetings, radiating charm. He hadn't seen her yet. His attention was fixed on a cluster of northern alphas, political targets he was cultivating. Then someone leaned close and whispered in his ear. His gaze swept the hall, found her, stopped. For 3 heartbeats, nothing existed except the space between them. Seren watched the color drain from his face, watched his confident smile freeze and crack, watched 18 months of certainty crumble into ash. She raised her goblet slightly. A toast. A taunt. I'm still here. Aldrich's expression cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally something that looked almost like fear before his mask slammed back into place. He smiled, that same warm, trustworthy smile, and inclined his head in greeting. Then he turned away, resuming his conversation as if nothing had happened. But Seren had seen the truth in that unguarded moment. He was terrified. Good. The first 2 days of the Concordance passed in a blur of formal negotiations and careful maneuvering. Aldrich kept his distance, but Seren felt his attention like a blade pressed against her throat. He was planning something. She could sense it. On the third night, she discovered what. She had stepped onto a balcony for air, the press of bodies and politics momentarily overwhelming. The mountain wind was cold and clean, carrying the scent of snow from distant peaks. Footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting Cassian. Aldrich Morvain stood in the doorway. "Hello, Seren." His voice was honey and venom. "You're looking remarkably well for a dead woman." "Funny, I was thinking you look remarkably calm for a murderer." "Murder?" He stepped onto the balcony, letting the door close behind him. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You disappeared before our wedding. We searched for months. I was devastated. You had your wolves drag me into Thornwood and ordered them to kill me." A misunderstanding. Overzealous guards responding to what they perceived as a threat. He moved closer. "I would never hurt you, Seren. I loved you. You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference." Aldrich's mask flickered. "Whatever grievances you think you have, this isn't the place to air them. You've somehow convinced Vargrim to marry you. Congratulations on that, by the way. Impressive social climbing. But if you try to make accusations here, at the Concordance, you'll only humiliate yourself." "Will I?" "You have no proof of anything. It's your word against mine, and I'm an alpha with a spotless reputation. You're a nobody who crawled out of obscurity into a convenient marriage." He smiled. "Who do you think they'll believe?" Seren held his gaze. "I think they'll believe the truth when they hear it." "The truth?" Aldrich laughed softly. "You always were naive. But let me make something very clear." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I know about your mother and brother, still living in that pathetic village near the southern border, aren't they? Still unprotected, still vulnerable." Ice flooded Seren's veins. "If you say one word against me at this Concordance," Aldrich continued, "they'll be dead before you return home. It will look like a raid. Tragic, random, unprovable." His eyes were flat and cold. "Do you understand? You're threatening my family. I'm explaining consequences. You've survived longer than you should have. Don't push your luck." He stepped back, the charming mask sliding into place. "Enjoy the rest of the Concordance, Luna Queen. And remember, some secrets are better left buried. Just like some people." He walked away, leaving Seren alone with the mountain wind and the weight of his threat. Her mother, her brother, the only family she had left. Aldrich would kill them without hesitation. She knew that with absolute certainty. She had to warn Cassian. She had to... "How much did you hear?" She spun. Cassian stood in the shadows at the far end of the balcony, his expression carved from stone. "Ah, all of it," he said quietly. "I followed when I saw him approach you. My family will be protected. I'm sending riders tonight." He crossed to her, his hands closing around her shoulders. "Look at me. Seren, look at me." She met his eyes, her own burning with unshed tears. "He will not touch them. I swear it on my blood and my throne." His grip tightened. "Do you trust me?" "Yes." "Then trust that I will keep them safe while we destroy him." His thumb brushed her cheek, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "He thinks he's won because he threatened what you love. He doesn't understand that he's just sealed his own fate." "What do you mean?" "He threatened the Luna Queen's family in front of a witness. Under Concordance law, that's not just a crime against you. It's grounds for me to demand a formal hearing on any accusations we bring against him." Cassian's eyes blazed with cold fire. "He's given us legal standing to expose everything, and tomorrow we use it." That night, Saren couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers, mind racing through every possible outcome. Cassian's riders had departed for the southern border within the hour. Her family would be moved to Ironholt, protected by the full strength of the Eastern Dominion. But Aldrich was cunning, desperate, and desperate wolves made deadly choices. A knock at her door. Soft, careful. She opened it to find Cassian, still dressed, shadows beneath his eyes. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you." He stepped inside without invitation. I couldn't stop thinking about what he said, about you being nobody. He's not wrong. 3 months ago, I was serving water in a border tavern. 3 months ago, I was a king without purpose. Cassian moved closer. I had power, allies, strategy. But I'd forgotten why any of it mattered. Revenge against Aldrich had become an end in itself, not a path to justice. And now I remember. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the pulse beating in his throat. "You reminded me. Every time you insisted on justice instead of vengeance. Every time you spoke the names of the wolves he'd killed. Every time you refused to let me make this purely about power. Cassian, I didn't marry you because you were useful, Seren." His voice was rough, stripped of its usual control. I told myself that. I believed it for perhaps the first week. But the truth is, I married you because when I found you in that tavern, something in me recognized something in you. 2 wolves who'd been broken by the same enemy. 2 wolves who refused to stay broken. Seren's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere between strategy and survival, this became real." He cupped her face in his hands. "I'm saying that when he threatened your family, I felt something I haven't felt since my sister was killed. Pure, absolute rage, not because it endangered our plans, but because it hurt you. That's not strategic at all." "No." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "It's terrifying. I've built my entire life on control, and you've dismantled it without even trying." Seren reached up, covering his hands with her own. "I was left in the dark to die by a man I thought I loved. I swore I would never trust anyone again." She turned her head, pressing a kiss to his palm. "But you found me? You saw what I could become before I saw it myself. And now I can't imagine facing any of this without you." "Then don't." He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes after, we face it together. Not as allies, not as strategy, as something I don't have words for yet. I might have a word for it." "What?" She kissed him. Not tentative, not questioning. A kiss that contained every sleepless night, every shared map, every moment of growing trust. He responded instantly, pulling her closer, one hand tangling in her hair. The kiss deepened into something fierce and tender and inevitable. When they finally broke apart, breathless, his eyes were brighter than she'd ever seen them. "That word," he said roughly. "I think I know it too." "Then say it." "Not yet." He pressed another kiss to her forehead. "After tomorrow, after we end this, I want to say it when we're free. Promise?" "I promise." He held her until dawn began to lighten the sky. Then, together, they prepared for war. The final day of the Concordance dawned cold and clear. All 24 alphas assembled in the Great Hall for the closing ceremonies. Aldrich sat in his place of honor, radiating confidence. He believed he had won. He believed Seren would stay silent to protect her family. He was wrong. Cassian rose as the ceremonies concluded. "Before we depart, I invoke the right of grievance." The hall went silent. The right of grievance was ancient law. Any alpha could demand that accusations be heard before the full concordance. It was rarely invoked. The consequences were severe for both accuser and accused. "On what grounds?" the presiding elder asked. "Attempted murder," Systematic fraud, conspiracy to destroy sovereign pacts through treachery. Cassian's voice carried like thunder. I accuse Alpha Aldrich Morvain of crimes against the realm. Chaos erupted. Alphas shouting, guards moving, Aldrich rising to his feet with theatrical outrage. This is absurd, Aldrich declared. Vargrim has been my enemy for years. He'll say anything to discredit me. Then let the evidence speak. Cassian gestured to Seren. My Luna Queen was once betrothed to Aldrich Morvain. She witnessed his crimes from within. She will testify. Every eye turned to Seren. She rose, the silver circlet catching the light. I was Seren Valeth of Thornmere, she began, her voice steady. For 2 years, I served as Aldrich's intended Luna, using my bloodline abilities to strengthen his pack. During that time, I witnessed the systematic destruction of 12 sovereign packs through assassination, manipulation, and fraud. Lies! Aldrich shouted. She's deranged. I ended our betrothal because she showed signs of mental instability. I have names. Seren's voice cut through his protest. Alpha Brennan Ashbourne of the Greymore territory, murdered through poisoned ceremonial wine before a formal challenge, his daughter taken as a war prize, given to Commander Draven as payment for loyalty. A murmur rippled through the hall. Alpha Kendrick leaned forward, eyes blazing. I have dates, Seren continued. I have locations. I have the methods used to make each conquest appear legitimate. She looked directly at Aldrich. And I have witnesses who will confirm everything, starting with Commander Draven himself, who has agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Aldrich's face went white. That's impossible. Draven would never. Draven realized that loyalty to you meant eventual execution when you no longer needed him. Cassian smiled coldly. He was surprisingly eager to talk once we guaranteed his safety. The doors opened. A haggard man in chains was led into the hall. Commander Draven, the wolf who had carried out Aldrich's darkest orders. It's true, Draven said, his voice hollow. All of it. I was there for the Ashbourne assassination. I disposed of bodies for 6 other packs. I delivered the Luna's daughter to my quarters on Aldrich's direct command. He looked at his former alpha with something like relief. I'm tired of carrying his secrets. The hall exploded. Alpha Kendrick surged to his feet. My daughter's mate was Ashbourne's cousin. You murdered him. My brother's pack was absorbed 3 years ago, another alpha shouted. They said he died in a border skirmish. My father trusted you with his territory negotiations, a third voice joined. He died 2 weeks later. Aldrich backed away from the rising tide of accusation. This is a conspiracy. Vargrim has manufactured evidence. He's bribed witnesses. Then explain this. Seren pulled a leather journal from her gown, a book she had retrieved from Ironholt's vaults, recovered by Cassian's spies months before. Your private ledger, your handwriting. Every pack you targeted, every alpha you murdered, every asset you seized. She threw it onto the central speaking floor. Explain how a servant's imagination conjured the exact same names and dates you recorded yourself. Aldrich stared at the journal like it was a venomous snake. The presiding elder rose. Alpha Aldrich Morvain, you stand accused of crimes against the peace of the realm. How do you answer? Silence. Then Aldrich moved. He shifted faster than thought, his wolf form exploding toward Seren, claws extended, jaws wide, murder in his eyes. Cassian intercepted him mid-leap. The 2 wolves collided in a thunderclap of fur and fury, crashing to the stone floor in a tangle of teeth and claws. The hall scattered, alphas pressing against walls as the fight raged. Seren watched, heart in her throat, as Cassian drove Aldrich back with savage efficiency. He was larger, stronger, trained for exactly this kind of combat, but Aldrich was desperate, and desperate wolves fought without limits. A claw raked across Cassian's shoulder, drawing blood. Seren gasped. Then Cassian found his opening. His jaws closed around Aldrich's throat. The hall went silent. Aldrich shifted back to human form, blood streaming from the wound at his neck, Cassian's teeth still pressed against his pulse. "Yield," Cassian growled, the word barely human. For a moment defiance flashed in Aldrich's eyes. Then it crumbled. "I yield." Cassian released him, shifting back as guards rushed forward to seize the defeated Alpha. The presiding elder's voice rang out. "Aldrich Morvain is found guilty by combat and testimony. His territories are forfeit. His crimes will be judged by the full council. Take him." As guards dragged Aldrich away, his eyes found Seren one last time. "You should have stayed dead," he whispered. "No." Seren stepped forward, meeting his gaze without fear. "You should have made sure I was." The aftermath was chaos. Statements to give, alliances to formalize, survivors to contact. It was nearly midnight before Seren and Cassian found themselves alone on the same balcony where Aldrich had threatened her family. The mountain wind had turned gentle, carrying the scent of victory. "Your family is safe," Cassian said. "My riders reached them this morning. They're en route to Ironholt now." Seren closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me. They're my family now too." She turned to look at him. Bandages wrapped his shoulder where Aldrich's claws had struck. Exhaustion lined his face, but his eyes were warm in a way she had never seen before. "You promised me something," she said softly. "After we ended this, a word you would say when we were free." Cassian moved closer, his hands finding her waist. "I did." "We're free now." "Yes." He cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I love you, Seren. I didn't plan it. I'm not even sure when it happened. Somewhere between finding you in that tavern and watching you face down the man who tried to destroy you. But I know it's true." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're supposed to be cold and strategic." "I was. You ruined that completely." He smiled. A real smile, unguarded and warm. "Loving you is the most irrational thing I've ever done. And I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you too." She laughed through her tears. "I thought I was broken. I thought I would never trust anyone again. But you saw who I could become before I saw it myself. You made me believe I was worth protecting." "You were always worth protecting." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You just needed someone to prove it." They stood there as the moon rose over Thorngate. Two wolves who had found each other through strategy and survival, and somehow arrived at something neither had expected. Love. Real, terrifying, unshakable love. 6 months later, Seren stood in the great hall of Ironholt, watching morning light stream through the tall windows. The space had been transformed. Where once there had been war maps and strategy tables, now there were smaller desks, training materials, and the quiet hum of activity. 23 women moved through the hall, survivors of Aldrich's conquest, wolves who had been taken as prizes or lost everything when their packs were destroyed. They were learning to read, to manage resources, to defend themselves. Seren called it the Ironholt Sanctuary. Cassian called it her revolution. 3 more applications this week, Marin reported, handing over a ledger. "Word is spreading through the Northern Territories. Women are traveling for weeks to reach us. We'll need to expand the East Wing. His Majesty has already approved the construction." Seren smiled. Of course he had. Among those recovering in the sanctuary was Brennan Ashbourne's daughter, finally freed from Commander Draven's cruelty. She was learning to speak again, to trust again. Some days, she even smiled. Aldrich had been executed a month prior, his crimes so extensive that even his former allies had voted for death. His territories were being returned to their original bloodlines, Over 40 families had been reunited with lands and titles stolen years before. Justice, not just revenge. Seren found Cassian in the war room, not planning battles now, but coordinating the resettlement of liberated Pack territories. "You're staring at me," he said, without looking up. "I'm admiring my husband. Is that not allowed?" He set down his pen, turning to face her. "It's encouraged, actually." She crossed to him, settling into his lap despite his half-hearted protest about important documents. He wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her close. "Do you remember the first time you saw me?" she asked. A server in a border tavern who understood words she shouldn't have known. His lips brushed her temple. "I thought you were a spy. And now? Now I think fate has a sense of humor." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I was looking for a weapon against my enemy. I found a partner, a queen, and the other half of my soul." Dramatic. Accurate. She kissed him softly. "I was left in the dark to die by a man who saw me as disposable. And I was found by a man who showed me I was irreplaceable. You showed yourself that. I just provided the battlefield." Outside the window, Ironholt's grounds stretched toward the horizon, gardens where once there had been only stone, families walking where once there had been only soldiers. Life, growing from the ashes of what they had destroyed together. Seren rested her head against Cassian's chest, listening to his heartbeat. She had been humiliated, abandoned, erased. She had survived on stubbornness and the desperate hope that someday, somehow, she would matter again. Now she was Luna, Queen of the Eastern Dominion, founder of a sanctuary for the broken, wife to a man who had chosen her when he could have used her, and somewhere in the mountains, in the ruins of a tyrant's empire, the wolves he had silenced were finally speaking their names again. All because an alpha king had underestimated a waitress, and she had understood every word. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story touched something in you, the fight for justice, the power of being seen, and the strength it takes to rise from ashes, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you're listening from. And if you're ready for another story where love conquers the impossible, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even in the darkest moments, love can find a way.